Thank you, Brandy and Dustin. Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to be here today. I'm Cole from Storytelling with Data, and I have a fun, practical, and short session for you today. So, when you are interested in getting into or advancing your career in analytics, often people focus on developing the technical side, which is great. But I also strongly advise taking time to get good at how you show and tell your data. So, let's kick things off with a story. I'm 6 years old. It is the Friday of the first week of school of the first grade, which marks the first time we're going to have show and tell. I get to school, I'm hanging up my things, and I see the new girl in our class, Rachel, showing a classmate what she's brought for show and tell that day. And it is this beautiful toy horse, right? The kind with the velvety texture that you just want to pet, has a long flaxen mane and tail. And I think to myself, wow, how lucky she is to have something like that. I can't wait to hear more about it. So we circle up, show and tell time comes, and we get to Rachel's turn, and she sort of curls into herself. She's looking at the floor. It's almost impossible to hear what she's saying. I can't even see the horse, really. I strain my ears to listen, but it's impossible. Even though I was really interested in what she was talking about, she couldn't keep my attention. Now, sadly, I see this exact same scenario play out in the adult world as well, where you may have awesome data. Maybe you've made a beautiful graph, but if you can't talk through that in a way that's going to capture and maintain your audience's attention, you're going to have some disappointed stakeholders, similar to me in that first grade classroom. So, today I want to share 5 quick, pragmatic tips that are going to help you keep that from happening, both in terms of how you show and how you speak when communicating data. Start off with tip number 1, which is to edit your graph. So, in the same way that we learn to edit our writing in school, we need to take an editing lens to our visual communications as well. When it comes to our graphs, that often means stripping out things that don't need to be there. We also want to make sure the grammar of our graphs is there, right? And this is things like titles and labels. Let's take a look at an example. There is some editing to be done here. Let me walk you quickly through my process. So I'm going to start off by taking away the graph border and the grid lines. Turn my attention next to the y-axis. I'm going to drop those trailing zeros that are unnecessary. Also add an axis title so my audience knows exactly what they're looking at. While we're focused on the top left, I'm also going to pull the title over there. We'll spend some more time with what that title says soon. Next, I'll look at my x-axis. I'm going to pull the years out into an axis title. Notice I also shifted the legend over to the side. Don't get too attached to that, though, because next I'm going to turn this graph from bars to lines, physically connect the points for my audience so they can see the trend over time. This also affords me the room to be able to label my data directly. We're not done yet. The next step is going to help us continue to refine, which is to form words. And this is actually one of the simplest things you can do to help yourself make better graphs for communicating to others. That is to take a bit of time to write some sentences about your graph, and then figure out how you might prioritize those things in terms of what you want to communicate to others. Let's take a look back at that graph. What observations might we make here? What sentences could we form about this data? There are a number of things we might highlight. Maybe I want to draw attention to the fact that the average test score was lowest in December. Or we might focus on the fact that test scores have improved over the latter part of the year. Perhaps there's something interesting about that high that they hit in June. Or I might draw attention to the fact that the range has decreased over the course of time. These are some of the observations. They're not all of them. But now, with that in mind, we can really be smart about how we employ this next tip to focus our audience's attention. You saw a little bit of this already as I was cycling through my sentences, but with all of those in mind, I can now take a look at my graph and figure out what might I do to help my audience see those things faster, and which of those is most important. How can I create visual hierarchy that will help navigate my audience as they look at my data? So I'm going to do a number of things. I retitled my graph to make it clear what I want my audience to pay attention to. I pulled the average visually forward, making that the clear focal point, added a label and a number to the end of it to really draw attention to what's happening in June. And the range is still there, but I pushed it to the background so it's not competing for attention. So we've got a nice looking graph, but we can still do more. So next, we're going to say it out loud. And this just means once you've made your graph, plan how you're going to talk through it. And there's actually value in doing that audibly, both to practice the words you're going to use, to form transitions between things, but then also to understand how you might further refine your visuals in order to make them better support you. So what you don't want to do is be competing for attention with your graph or your slide. You want to work in concert together. So in this case, as I talk through what I might do here, let's imagine that I am the teacher of this class, and I'm going to be presenting this disaster turned success story to my administration. I might start by setting up the graph, right? Talking about what the different axes mean, how we should interpret them. Then I want to focus on the average, but I don't necessarily want to focus on all of it at once. I can start off at the beginning of the year, which will allow me to lend some context to what has happened over the course of time. And maybe after I get through that piece of my story, I might layer on the range so that I can provide some commentary and context there as well. So I could do all of that with this graph, but I can also make some minor changes to it that will help make it better support me through that process. We'll see what that looks like momentarily after quick tip number 5, stand up. This is something that is obvious to do in a formal presentation from stage, but there are actually big benefits to standing up in a normal day-to-day business meeting setting as well. Right? Voice follows body. So if we think back to Rachel in that first grade classroom, when she was rolled into herself, right? If I do that and I say, I have a disaster turned success story to share with you, it sounds very different than if I physically stand. Gives me more space to use my body, right? Because now if I say, I have a disaster turned success story to share with you today, sounds a little more like something you might want to engage with, right? Let's take a look, pulling everything together, at just what that might look and sound like. So today, I'm going to walk you through what test scores have looked like over the course of the past school year. We'll start by plotting out the average test score on the y-axis, and we'll be starting back in September at the left-hand side, moving through to the end of the school year in June. Back in September, test scores started out fairly mediocre, right? That dot is at 60%. Not surprising coming out of COVID, but I knew there was room for improvement. Sadly, however, as we got a little more complicated with things over the course of the first part of the year, we did not see that improvement. Rather, test scores took a pretty significant nosedive in those first few months. And I just remember going into winter break thinking, what am I doing? How can I help my students? So I turned that frustration into motivation and did some research to really understand different strategies that I could try to get these concepts understood so my students could know them and apply them. I knew it was going to be a slow process. I saw a little bit of increase in January, which was motivating, but then things stagnated. This is as I'm still trying out different strategies. Then, though, in March, I hit sort of a magical thing. I formed study groups with students. And I think the real magic here was mixing different ability levels, because what I found was that people were sharing their challenges and also their strategies. We saw immediate marked improvement, not only in the average that you see here, but in particular, the lower scoring students saw big increases, which we'll look at momentarily. This continued through the course of the rest of the year, all the way up to an 88% average test score in June, which I am thrilled about. Next, if we layer on that range, we can see overall it narrows over time. So there's less variability in how students are performing. And notice it's going upwards over the course of the year. Here's that specific increase we saw in lower scores with the introduction of study groups. So I am so excited about this, not only for my own students going forward, because I absolutely plan to introduce study groups earlier in the year, in the coming year, but I also really would like to share this with other teachers so that we can together help more students. That is a quick illustration of the importance of both the show and tell for better data communications. So in a short 10 minutes, I've shared 5 practical tips that can improve your data communications. All right, after you have formed your graph and taken some time with it, it's time to edit when you're getting ready to communicate that to someone else. Form words to help you understand what you can use your graph to say and how you might prioritize those things. Keep that in mind. Use it to drive how you focus attention. You can talk through your graph out loud, both to find the words that are going to help you do so, as well as to find further refinements to make for your graph so that it better supports you. And finally, stand up to deliver stellar presentations. Speaking of which, I am very excited to share that my new book is coming in September. Storytelling with You focuses on the role that you play when communicating, whether data or really anything. It takes you through the full process of planning, creating, and delivering stellar content and a stellar presentation. You can visit storytellingwithyou.com to get sample content and pre-order. And with that, I'm very happy to answer any questions you may have.
Oh, you're muted, Dustin.
Perfect.
I'm happy you said that, Brandy. I was getting concerned that I was the only one who couldn't hear him, which was going to make the Q&A a little awkward.
Let's be honest, this is bound to happen, right? Somebody's going to themselves.
Yeah, good to have it happen off the bat. Awesome presentation. Thanks so much, Cole. Lots of positive comments in the chat. Folks loved everything that you shared. Some really good questions. So I like this question from Tammy. Tammy mentioned that, it can be kind of hard to fit in time to put together a story around what you're presenting. She's wondering, how much time do you like to build in to really put together a good story around your data?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there's no specific answer to that, right? Or I guess one answer I would give that applies pretty universally is it always takes more time than you think it will or think it should. But the biggest lesson here is just to be devoting time to this piece. And the more you do it, the faster you'll get, right? So if you think about if you're wanting to take one of your regular reports and start to use that to tell a story, give yourself days, right, at least to do that, where you can take some time to look through the report. And this is really where you can add value for your clients, because this is where you can say, here's the report, right? You are welcome to go through it. I'll walk through it with you, but I've also already taken the time to do that. And now here, up front, maybe it's just a few graphs and more of a coordinated story like what we saw me just illustrate. Here are the things you need to pay attention to this time. And that's probably the biggest lesson there is don't try to tell a story with every bit of data you're showing, right? There's not going to be story there. Use story when there is something new or something unexpected, something you need people to understand, and especially something you need them to take action on. That's the right sort of scenario to then be going through to full bore story like we saw today.
Awesome. Thank you, Cole, and thank you for the question, Tammy. We do have one other question from Max. He is wondering, what software do you like to use to create your charts?
So I'll just reveal everything you saw today was done directly in PowerPoint, right? There's nothing fancy. And it doesn't mean there's not great reasons to learn more complicated tools. But we find at Storytelling with Data, almost all of our work happens in Excel and PowerPoint, mainly because these tools are pervasive, right? Anyone can pick them up and make a graph. So when it comes to deciding what tools you want to invest your time in, one lesson is it doesn't take fancy tools to communicate well, right? You want to make sure you are equipped with tools that are going to help you analyze your data to the extent that you need to, and you're not feeling limited by what you can do. But when it comes to the visualization, the communication piece, really the most important tool you need is up here, right? And time, as we talked about. Because if you can envision or sketch what you need things to look like, then you just want to get to know a tool as best you can so that it doesn't become limiting in bringing those ideas to life. And really any tool that will allow you to graph data will let you do that once you learn it well enough to do so.
Awesome.
I will mention also, actually, I should probably plug, we have a YouTube channel. You can go to storytellingwithdata.com/YouTube, and we do have some tool tutorials. And a lot of our blog posts, when we're posting makeovers in Excel, allow you to download the Excel so that you can poke around and see how that was done. The books on our site also have all of the graphs and data that you can download as well.
Awesome. Yeah, so definitely recommend everyone to check out those resources. These resources have been totally transformative for my career. I know Brandy's as well. I always keep a stash of Cole's books, try to get the light better.
I love it.
Yeah, I give these out to colleagues, to folks that have worked for me. When folks ask me, hey, what should I do to move up? If they invite me to lunch or coffee, I try to bring an extra copy if I've got it and give that as a gift. So definitely recommend checking out her books that are out there, as well as pre-ordering her new book that's coming up, which she shared. Yeah. Brandy and I have both pre-ordered it.
Yay, hooray.
Yeah. I also just want to mention, Cole, yes, you have a podcast, you have a website, but you also do public workshops, right? So people are looking to practice and get their hands on and do that. Storytellingwithdata.com has public workshops as well. You can even do custom workshops if you want to bring Cole into your organization and teach a bunch of people, which I absolutely love. And then you even have a community where you do weekly or monthly challenges too. So always a really great opportunity to practice, right? I think practice is really important because it's one of those skills you gotta practice.
You've got to do to get better. Yeah. And I appreciate the plug, Brandy. We actually have just opened registration for our fall workshops. We'll have really special events both here in Milwaukee and then also in London. And those are timed right around the time that the new book comes out. So there'll be some fun celebratory events in addition to our classic one-day Storytelling with Data workshop. So definitely recommend checking those out.
Awesome.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, Cole, for spending time with us. That was awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Great. Enjoy the rest of your sessions. Thank you.
Thank you so much.